News now at 10. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has begun. Bomb blasts being heard across the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv, where it is now Thursday morning.
The blasts being felt just minutes after Russian President Putin announced that he is launching a special military operation in Donbass, an area of Ukraine that he declared independent this week.
President Biden condemning the, quote, unprovoked and unjustified attack, saying the prayers of the entire world are with the people of Ukraine. Complete coverage now on the News at 10. Good evening, I'm Micah Ullman.
And I'm Cher Calvin. There are explosions in several areas of Ukraine tonight after Russian President Vladimir Putin's announcement of a so-called special military operation.
Earlier, the U.S. warned Ukraine that a wider invasion was imminent, and tonight President Biden blaming Russia for what he calls the catastrophic loss of life that will follow. Here now, a live picture from Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, where it is just after 8 a.m. Thursday morning.
Ukrainian President Zelensky has declared martial law and told residents not to go to work or school and to stay indoors. Now let's take a look at the map of the region and focus on the right of your screen. That is the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine, home to many separatists still loyal to Russia.
That's where Putin had initially ordered his troops, calling the invasion a, quote, peacekeeping mission. It's also where the Russian military may make its first direct contact with Ukraine's army. A lot going on tonight. Our Pedro Rivera tracking all of it for us from the newsroom. Pedro.
At this hour, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has declared martial law, as you mentioned, in his country in response to the Russian invasion. The president urging his citizens to stay calm as explosions are being heard in multiple cities, including the capital of Kyiv, after Russia announces tonight they have launched a special military operation in eastern Ukraine. Less than an hour ago, we started hearing air raid sirens in the capital of Kyiv. This is the area known as Maidan Square in the heart of the city. We also want to show you this image. It was just posted by the Ukrainian government about a half hour ago. A big explosion in Kyiv as viewed from the airport. The first explosion in a wider war still to come. In this early morning address, Russian President Vladimir Putin says his troops will hold a special military operation in eastern Ukraine for what he says is in an effort to protect the Donbass region, an area he declared independent days ago. The Russian president claiming that the goal is not to occupy Ukraine, saying, quote, bloodshed lies with the Ukrainian regime. Reports from the ground say explosions can be heard in the capital city of Kyiv. This is video showing explosions lighting up the skies from Kharkiv. So far, no injuries have been reported.
This is a perilous moment, and we're here for one reason and one reason only: to ask Russia to stop.
In a special UN Security Council meeting held Wednesday night, U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield making the plea to Russian officials to call off an invasion.
Return to your borders. Send your troops and your tanks and your planes back to their barracks and hangars.
That emergency meeting coming to an abrupt end with the Ukrainian ambassador saying,
there is no purgatory for war criminals. They go straight to hell.
Early Wednesday, U.S. intelligence learned Russian forces arrived to the final points of readiness with troops and tanks to the east, north, and south of Ukraine. The United States issuing sanctions on Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, an effort that has not slowed down the invasion. In a televised address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky told his citizens he reached out to his Russian counterpart, who did not return his calls. However, Zelensky saying they are prepared to defend their homeland.
Нам не нужна война, не холодная.
If we are attacked by troops, if they try to take away our country, our freedom of life, the lives of our children, we will defend ourselves. And directly to Russian citizens, the president saying we need to stop before it's too late. President Biden responded to the attack by saying that they are monitoring the situation. He released a statement saying, quote, the prayers of the entire world are with the people of Ukraine tonight as they suffer an unprovoked and unjustified attack by Russian military forces. President Putin has chosen a premeditated war that will bring a catastrophic loss of life and human suffering, adding the world will hold Russia accountable. President Biden has released a second statement just moments ago saying he has spoken to Ukrainian President Zelensky. We are expecting more from President Biden tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. our time, when he's expected to formally announce more severe sanctions on Russia. Now, we will continue to keep you updated on the latest developments as they happen at 10:30 and 11. Cher, Micah, back to you.
All right, Pedro, thank you. We want to take a closer look now at the escalating conflict that could cost thousands of Ukrainians their lives and affect lives around the world.
Professor Robert English, Director of Central European Studies at USC, joins us live to help us put it all into perspective. And thank you for joining us, Professor. We heard President Putin speaking earlier, and in his speech, and that was released, he said that he is not invading Ukraine, even though that is exactly what's happening. Can we try and dissect this a little bit?
Well, there's some things we don't know and some things we do. What we don't know is how grand his territorial ambitions are. One possibility is that what we're seeing now is the paralysis, the destruction of the Ukrainian Air Force and air defenses, and hopefully that will only be followed by a small land incursion in that Donbas region. That would be tragic. That will cost hundreds and probably thousands of lives, but it's the best we can hope for now. The worst, of course, would be an attempt to seize broad chunks of Ukrainian territory, even occupying the capital, and that's the end of the world. I mean, that is a level of violence and destruction ahead that's unimaginable. What we do know, that's what we don't know, but what we do know is that this is going to bring really crippling response from the West. Crippling sanctions, complete diplomatic isolation, round condemnation. I wouldn't even be surprised to see China distance itself from some of this brutality, much less the European countries who have been hesitant so far to apply really tough sanctions, right? President Putin has taken a really fateful turn.
Robert, you mentioned the sanctions. As we've been reporting, the U.S. and its allies prepared to impose what they're describing as full-scale sanctions as early as tomorrow, targeting banks, other financial institutions in Russia, and potentially even President Putin himself, as indicated by President Biden. What do those sanctions look like, and what does it mean for Russia?
Well, first up is probably Russia's expulsion from the SWIFT system, right? The system for international transfers, financial transfers, which essentially cuts Russia off from this system. That will be crippling. It's a nuclear option that's been held in reserve till now. We can expect to see many more sanctions on just about everyone involved with the military and diplomatic side in Russia, meaning they won't be able to travel, their assets will be frozen, their children can't go to school abroad. All the things the upper class that supports Putin or close to the oligarchs enjoy, we will try to take away, and then some. Right? This is just a start. We could see also blockading technology exports, trying to, semiconductors, machine tools, all kinds of things. They will come at a heavy cost, especially to Europe, because trade is a two-way street, and it's going to hurt both sides. But now I'm sure we will see much more resolve on the part of countries like Germany, France, and Italy that have been hesitant so far. Again, President Putin has really taken a fateful and irreversible turn. It's going to be bad, and it's going to hit us economically too, us here in the United States.
The question now is, what does the Ukrainian president do? Does he stay? Does he go? There were talks that maybe perhaps that Zelensky could move to Poland to stay safe.
Again, that depends on that first unknown, which is, will this be a modest land offensive limited to the eastern Ukraine once these initial strikes are over? Or will the Russian forces actually invade from the north and occupy the capital? If they go for the capital, of course the president, right, will have to go into a sort of a government in exile, or at least in the western part of the country. But if indeed we don't see that attack, well, then maybe he'll stay and try to rally the nation from Kiev. We can't know. It depends on what the Russians do in the next few hours.
And Robert, to go back to the beginning sort of here, in a broader context, describe the friction that exists between Ukraine and Russia. Why does it exist? And Vladimir Putin clearly believing that he's justified in moving into Ukraine as he's doing tonight.
Well, the friction doesn't exist between ordinary people. That I can tell you. Ordinary Ukrainians and Russians are historically close, linguistically and culturally intermixed, and the vast majority want to live in peace with each other. The friction exists, first of all, with the Kremlin, with Vladimir Putin and his paranoia. We can only call it now paranoia about Ukraine drawing closer and closer to the West. And the tripwire for him seems to be Ukraine creeping towards membership in NATO. Right? He just cannot stand the idea of Ukraine on his border with an American-led military alliance and bases there. And, you know, he begged for NATO to back off. He demanded, he insisted, he rattled sabers. The Western side stood firm, and this is the result. End to diplomacy, no compromise, military brute force.
Professor Robert English, Director of Central European Studies at USC, thank you so much for your time and expertise.